Welcome, bienvenue, September 9th, Irnieracing News 2023. The US announces $1 billion more for Ukraine, including depleted uranium. That's right, guys. The same thing as the British did, Ukrainian depleted uranium shells to go along with the tanks. Now the US is doing it, the same thing that Britain did. What was it, just 3 months ago, when I did a story on the depleted uranium shells. Guys, go back on the Irnieracing channel if you don't know what depleted uranium shells are and how they impact the area that they're used upon for 100 years into the future. See, the depleted uranium does not go away. It contaminates the soil. It's you know, it's like, go watch the documentary on Chernobyl, and you'll see what the toxic uranium can do, the radiation. We're talking about generations of terrible birth defects. We're talking about cancer for people in 1 to 5 years exposed. Just everybody, if you haven't seen the Chernobyl, that's a really good, it was like a 3 or 4 part series. It might even be on like BoobTube, Netflix bullshit. But anyways, the US is going to send another $1 billion this month. You know, there's always a new aid package every month. So another $1 billion, guys, another $1 billion that could help with local, like we're at the state park here. It could help with like the cost of the state park, $50 a day to camp. It could help with your food prices. It could help with the homeless. It could help with your infrastructure, medical. Holy crap, yeah, like this just wasted money and creating more inflation, more printing of money. That's what they're doing. But let's get into the story about it. So here we have Secretary of State Antony Blinken announced Washington would send over $1 billion in additional aid to Ukraine. So it's again propagating the war machine. It's not aid to Ukraine. It's just more weapons and missiles into the meat grinder that is Ukraine, between the USA and Russia. It goes in to say that $275 million for the military. You know, what does that mean? What military? What are they doing? Just, you know, military equipment? So like the soldiers who are Ukrainian men that are not just recruited but forced to go to the front line and die in the meat grinder, they've actually been getting 1 to 3 months of training. So you're taking guys who just shot a gun and they're like, oh, this is how the gun shoots, right? And then boom, ship them off to the front line. And then if the smart ones literally run over the line, save us, don't shoot us, with their white flag to join the Russian side, as the Ukrainian general or lead commander shooting them in the back for running away. Essentially, this is what really is happening, guys. They're literally like, if you don't go forward into the front line, I'm going to blow you up with this grenade or shoot you in the back. Like, they're forced to go into the meat grinder. And ones that can get over to the Russian side or actually live, if they can get over there with their white flag style. And $300 million for the police. Again, these are the police that are rounding up. They need more men to go die in the meat grinder to use these weapons, these depleted uranium weapons. And over $200 million in humanitarian assistance. Oh, that's going to be some real bullshit, I'm sure. You got to realize a lot of these guns and weapons are on the black market being sold right now as well. Like, they're all out there. The weapons from the US are funneling into the money of these oligarchs. Like Zelensky's, what was it, his sister or whatever, or his aunt just bought like $100 million place in Egypt. Did you not read about this? It's ridiculous. So the money's getting funneled from all these weapons, all this money. It's all being stolen. Like, we're talking about one of the most corrupt countries in the world, guys, where they're growing children without birth certificates, and then the children are being obviously completely thrown in the gutter and used as, you know, literally sacrificial children. It's insane. It's not just human trafficking. They're growing children out there. So the arms package includes depleted uranium, known to have grave health and environmental consequences. Of course, the top American diplomat explained that $175 million worth of weapons will be transferred from the U.S. to Ukraine under the Presidential Drawdown Authority. Blinken made the announcement while meeting with top Ukrainian officials attending photo ops in Kyiv. Breaks it down. The Department of Defense package includes equipment to support air defense systems, ammunition for HIMARs like HIMARS, 155mm, 105mm artillery rounds. The Pentagon is also providing 81mm mortar systems rounds, 120mm depleted uranium tank ammunition, tow missiles, Javelin and AT-4 anti-armor systems, small arms ammunition, tactical air navigation systems, tactical secure communication systems, support equipment, as well as demolitions munitions. This package is the 46th the White House has approved during the Joe Biden administration. This is the 46th billion-dollar plus AIDS package, war machine package. The Lockheed Martins, they're just raking in the money, guys, producing all the money. You have these owned by the, you know, all the shares from BlackRock and the Soros. Like, these are the guys that are making all the money. And, you know, you have the Joe Biden. Ugh. All right, guys, crooked Joe Biden, the 46th package that he sent. All their money. Oh, I mean, they're at the RV park. There's RVs walking by. Hold on. However, it is the first time Washington approved the transfer of depleted uranium to Ukraine. The ammunition is toxic and is linked to cancer and birth defects in places it has been used, including Iraq, guys, and Afghanistan. The Pentagon says total military aid to Ukraine tops $43 billion. Blinken said Kyiv will additionally receive $100 million in grants to buy weapons in the future. Oh, they're going to receive another $1 billion next month. Don't worry, guys. The Pentagon says, oh yeah, total $43 billion. And I'm sure it's more than that. That's just what they're telling us. So let's go into subcategory U.S. to arm Ukraine with toxic depleted uranium ammunition. This was September 3rd. Depleted uranium, DU, is a heavy metal that's a byproduct of enriched uranium and is extremely dense, making it a good material for armor-piercing rounds. But DU ammunition is toxic and is linked to cancer and birth defects in places it is used, including Iraq, where the U.S. used an enormous amount of DU in the Gulf War and the 2003 invasion. The UK has already provided Ukraine with DU ammunition for use with British-made Challenger 2 tanks. That was the Challenger tanks. But the U.S. has yet to take the step towards, this is the next step, guys, towards the atomic World War III. It absolutely, it just keeps pushing the marker over the line. Like, they're stepping over the line. That's what it is. The line was set in the road here at the path at the campground, and now you're entering the Russian campsite with this is pushing the boundaries. This is pushing us towards world war, towards atomic uranium war.
Yeah.
All right, Dr. G's beside me and is kind of asking, it's like, well, why is Canada involved in this? Why are all these other countries involved? And I'm trying to, it's really difficult to explain, but we're all part of NATO. And so these alliances is what brings people into war, and they're based on false pretexts. You know, these proxy wars, everybody thinks, well, why are we sending our 1 or 2 tanks from Canada to Ukraine? Why is the U.S. sending $1 billion every year? It's the war machine. It's the industrial war machine, and that makes all the oligarchs richer. It makes the Lockheed Martins richer, and the Lockheed Martins are owned by the BlackRocks, and the BlackRocks buy up all the land in Ukraine when it's all destroyed. Just like with the Maui fire, the government's trying to buy up all the land. Well, the BlackRock, the government, like, you're taking private land from people. It's just like the farmers in the Netherlands. We're going to buy up all your farmland and shut down all the farming, and you have to sell to us, or we'll just take it. Well, if you just bomb the whole area of Ukraine, it's like, okay, now BlackRock's already apparently bought up half of the land. And then now the Maui fires, like, how do you displace people? You set it on fire, you blow it up. I mean, that's, and then they take ownership. And that land has the most, in Ukraine, the land has some of the most fertile black soil on the earth for growing. People say you can just, like, literally, like, throw down some seed, and then all of a sudden, you know, months later, you're going to have, like, the most beautiful plants. Like, so it's a rich, fertile ground. Of course, oil is another thing. You know, Russia has tons of oil. And, of course, Russia is the only country that has stayed out of the deep state narrative. They're the only ones pushing back on the deep state. You know, they create their own cars, they have their own gold, they've started their own BRICS system, and now the BRICS is like almost half the world's GDP, over half the world's land, and this is a huge direct threat that the U.S. has created now by accident. But there's a lot of stupid people in the U.S. that push things, and it makes it worse for us, right? Our food prices go worse, the housing prices go worse. Like, that's a byproduct. It's not, you know, they're almost trying to ruin you on purpose. It just seems so stupid. Take a break here. Dr. G just threw in the point about, like, you know, it's the same thing with Epstein. You know, he's involved in the deep state. He's involved with the slavery. It's like, and I'm just trying to explain, like, people need to understand that there is true evil in human beings. There's a lot of people that don't give a shit about growing babies and having them ritually sacrificed or sexually destroyed, sold for sexual acts for these crazy pedophiles. And now they're trying to normalize pedophiles, right? And that's what they've been doing lately. They're like, oh, we're not going to call them that anymore, right? There's a new term. I can't remember, you know, sexually attracted humans, or sexually attracted human children, or whatever, baby, I don't know. But like, how do people do this? How do people not just like, you know, like grow kids and murder them, and slavery and murder and death, and murder, death, kill, like people.
Well, and they're sending off their kids to war. Right?
Yeah, and then all like the meat grinder in this country like Ukraine. None of this is protecting Ukraine. It's the opposite. This is destroying all the. Pretty soon, Ukraine will run out of Ukrainian men. They're gonna make the Ukrainians extinct. Like this is on the path for that. They're gonna push this war in Ukraine to the very last Ukrainian man. And then the U.S. is already in there with their undercover dudes. Like, you know, there's already Americans in there. But like they're not announced yet. But there's been caught, even when Ukraine was using the drones to attack Russia, civilian buildings, like drones are attacking whatever they could hit. No strategic targets. Just this is their offensive. They have no offensive, so they're doing whatever they can. So on that point is like they found U.S. Humvees and U.S. like military vehicles in Russia now on that offensive, and there's pictures of it, and the U.S. just like, oh, we don't know anything about it, we can't confirm, deny, you know, we would never be out there. But the armor, there's photos of it. I mean, it's very likely that the U.S. military stuff was used by the Ukrainians, and sometimes instigated by the U.S. or ordered. And I mean, if this war wanted to be shut down, the only person to shut it down right now is the U.S. It's like, okay, war's over, guys. We're not sending you any more money, no more weapons. It's over. The Ukraine will be like, okay, it's over. Shut down. The only reason the war is still going on is because of the USA, which is NATO. Don't get this wrong. NATO is USA. Canada is not NATO. Canada is just like, oh, we'll send you 2 tanks because we're part of your conglomerate. We're in your narrative. And all these assholes are at the WEF getting their barking orders, going down the chain. Ugh. Okay, moving on, guys. Why should we be concerned about depleted uranium, which the U.S. is now sending and UK sent earlier, and then Russia, Putin blew up the depleted uranium. There was video I posted in the video, like, of all the explosions where they, because, you know, he's tracking everything. The Ukraine has just did a terrible job. They put all depleted uranium shells into some buildings for holding, and then the U.S. or Russia just bombed those buildings, and giant explosion of depleted uranium in one concentrated zone. And yeah, it's not going to be good. There's going to be a big uranium cloud that'll travel a little bit towards Germany, but it's not nearly as bad as having the shells displaced across the entire countries, right? So the story broke in March that the UK is supplying depleted uranium to Ukraine. The depleted uranium is contained in shells used by tanks. Britain has supplied 14 Challengers 2 tanks capable of using DU shells to Ukraine. Thousands of rounds of Challenger 2 ammunition have been sent, but it is not known how many contain DU. What is depleted uranium? Is a heavy metal byproduct created during the process of developing nuclear weapons or nuclear fuel. Like, you can get the fuel from the nuclear facilities, right? Creating power. It's their waste, essentially. To create weapons or fuel for nuclear reactors, uranium, a naturally occurring metal, needs to be enriched. During the enrichment process, uranium-235 is separated from uranium-238. It's like that bus name, right? And what remains after the process is called depleted uranium. Depleted uranium is radioactive because it still contains some of the original radioactive matter, but at a much lower level compared to the original material. Why is it used by the military? It's a dense material that can pierce through thick armor when used in ammunition. It literally melts through the metal, guys, on impact. It melts through the tank. This means it can do real harm to enemy equipment like tanks. The material can be used as a protective measure. Armor made from depleted uranium is much stronger and does not corrode easily, which makes it useful in conflict situations. Oh, that's news to me. A small number of militaries around the world, including the US and UK, use depleted uranium to make ammunition and tank armor. It was first used in 1977, producing armor-piercing rounds and later tank armor, including the Gulf War of 1999, Bosnia 92-95, Kosovo 99, Iraq, and Syria. The concerns are depleted uranium impacts the health of civilians who live close by to the war zone and soldiers who are exposed during battle because it is chemically toxic and slightly radioactive. It's been linked to, again, the spike in cancer and birth defects. So soldiers can be exposed when the projectiles strike their targets. They can fragment, releasing fine particles that can contaminate the air and be inhaled or ingested. There is a long-term environmental impact of DU in post-conflict zones, whether heavy metals leaking into water or residents being in close contact with the ammunition. So in areas like Basra, the Gulf War, the researchers published studies showing that in the area, cases of leukemia in children increased by 60% between 1990 and 97, finding a link between DU and health defects. In 2001, the UK government admitted that thousands of British troops who served in Kosovo during the NATO-led conflict in 99 were at risk from the effects of DU after a health warning failed to reach soldiers. Declassified reports that Italian courts are finding in favor of veterans who developed cancer after being exposed to depleted uranium while serving in the Balkans in the 1990s. So, there's sufficient evidence to suggest that DU cannot be considered a safe weapon to local communities and soldiers. The United Nations has criticized the UK for supplying the DU to Ukraine. Now the UK is supplying DU to Ukraine, campaigns, blah, 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 and so is the US now. So here you have the instigation going up. So now President Vladimir Putin announced he was deploying nuclear weapons to Belarus. He said it was a response to the UK arming Ukraine with the EU. And this is the escalation, guys. Like, if you were on that side of the team, like I'm not on either side of the team. I'm certainly not on the US side of the team, because it's, you know, just a bunch of narrative assholes. I mean, trying to destroy our world, our planet, our countries, our economy, everything. Plastic straws right down to the store. When you have somebody setting up missile silos on your border, it's just like the Cuban Missile Crisis I keep going back to. Like, this was a huge thing for the U.S. All of a sudden, you know, Russia, Soviets have missiles in Cuba because the U.S. has missiles in Turkey and here and here and here. And it's the same thing. It's like the U.S. has 5 missile bases all around Russia, and then Russia puts one in Cuba, and all of a sudden it's the Cuban Missile Crisis. It's a standoff. So it's just like, you know, I've been watching the Americans. It's like the Americans are making these biological crazy weapons that could be infecting people, and then the Russian spies, they like, we need to get a sample of these in case they use it on us. So we need to make a recourse to this. So we need to get samples of their crazy biological infections that they're creating, their pathogens, so we can at least create a defense in case they use it on us. So then both sides have to have it. Both sides have to have nuclear weapons. Both sides have to have the information. It's just a non-stop stalemate. And when the stalemate doesn't happen, the U.S. drops atomic bombs on Japan, right? Murdering civilians. Civilians, women and children, have nothing to do with the military strategic effect. Besides, like, we will annihilate your civilians if you don't stop your war campaign on these war lands, right? Again, the U.S. is the only country in the world to use atomic bombs premeditated. The U.S. didn't use the bombs because they were attacked. This has nothing to do with Pearl Harbor, which was they wanted to happen, to instigate. You know, just like 9/11 got the Homeland Security Act, 9/11 instigated the Patriot Act. They needed that to happen, or instigated to happen, whatever you believe. Just go look at all the facts. But the same outcome is still, they needed to get the American people to fear for their lives, to give up their rights. And this is what happens all the time. And so the same thing with Pearl Harbor. And now, so the U.S. wasn't attacked. There was no war on U.S. land at all. There was no, like, we're occupying Chicago, we're occupying Washington. None of that happened. There's no occupation. There was no freedom convoy occupation either. There was no occupation at all. It was just an all improvement. It was a peaceful protest. So imagine you're doing a peaceful protest and they call it an occupation, and then they dump an atomic bomb on freaking somewhere as retaliation. That's what the U.S. did. But so the Russian, Putin, they have an atomic code as well. And their atomic code is, if you attack the motherland, and that includes Crimea. If you attack the motherland, we have a nuclear response to then bomb a U.S. city. Just any U.S. city, essentially. I'm sure they have favorite targets. But so this is the pressure that's being put on. Like, the U.S. knows this is their code. They know it's their code, and yet they keep pushing and pushing. They put all the missile bases against the treaty that they had. You're not allowed to do any of those missile bases on our border. It's no different than China or Russia having missile bases along the Mexican border of the U.S. or, say, in Canada on the U.S. border. It's a direct threat. The missiles are 1 minute from hitting target time, right? It's all about the time that it takes from launch to hit. And, of course, we had how many freaking biolabs, you know, were discovered in Ukraine as well, and that was all shutted up. We do not have biological weapon facilities in Ukraine. Freaking asshole, you know, for national defense, whatever that joke guy was, he said, and That's a bunch of malarkey. I'm actually quoting him from my memory. It's a bunch of malarkey. We do not have biological weapon facilities in Ukraine. And yes, guess what? There's 25, 30 of them out there. I can't remember. They're all lying to you. Somebody said an analogy. It was on a story the other day. I saw on a show. It's like, I am only responsible for one child. Say that you have one child or 2 kids. My job is to be responsible for those 2 kids. That's my one job. The government is responsible for all the citizens, right? And he says, and I lie to my kids all the time, right? What do you think the government's doing? You think the government doesn't? When do they ever tell the truth? It's more like very rare to tell you the truth, right? So continuing on another point about depleted uranium or atomic bombs. If you guys don't know, look up Bikini Island. So the U.S. was testing all its atomic bombs off of the shores of Bikini Island, and the Bikini Island people lived there and died because of it. From 1 year to 5 years, most of them are all dying from cancer. And the U.S. knew all this and used them as guinea pigs. They monitored these people. They told them, like, oh, you guys can leave for this amount of time, and now it's safe to go back to Bikini Island. Don't worry, you'll be fine. And then they all went back and they watched them and tested on them. And they'd actually take a few of them home and put them in their radiation measuring device and to measure the radiation levels in their body, and, you know, do the ultrasounds or whatever, the MRIs back in whatever this time period was when they were testing. And they literally murdered the people of Bikini Island. And now the bikini is named Bikini, and most people have no idea why the bikini is, why women wear bikinis. It's hilarious, like how they try to make it something better by calling it the bikini, I guess. I don't remember that detail exactly, but it's ironic. But go look up Bikini Island, guys. Go look up what the U.S. has been doing. They don't give a shit. These governments, these oligarchs, these BlackRocks, these Soros, they don't care about you or I. They only care about control, money, power. We literally live in the dark night of the world. Like, we literally live in the depleted uranium, World War III, worst times of man. We're going to jump ahead and finish this article here. To finish off, the UN opposes sending uranium rounds to Ukraine. The Pentagon has announced it will give Kyiv depleted uranium for the Abraham. So, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, we are against the use of depleted uranium ammunition anywhere in the world, said Haag, the deputy spokesperson for UN Secretary. But you know what? They don't do anything. They don't do UN. They're all part of it. They're just like making a little thing. Oh, we don't agree with that, but we really secretly agree with it, because the UN has been pushing this whole along with the COVIDism, along with the bullshit 19. They push it all along. They stop all inquiries. No, we don't want an investigation into the Nord Stream pipelines. No, we all voted in the EU and the UN. We voted. We don't need to do investigation. No, that's not important. It's only the most important terrorist act in the last 20 years. Like, we don't need to look into this depleted uranium. No, guys. Washington is following London's footsteps in providing controversial munitions to Kyiv. They're just pushing the envelope, guys. It has nothing to do with like the helping Ukraine win this war. It's impossible to win. They have no men left. They have no strategic. You need people who are in the army for years to learn how to fight. If you give a guy a gun with 1 month training, you think he has a chance against a real soldier? They have no strategy. There's no like left, right flank. You know, they don't know anything. It's just throwing babies in the meat grinder. This is Irnieracing News, guys. This gets all me upset. I'm going to go relax. Have a good one. Cheers.